In a world filled with noise, urgency, and endless distraction, peace has become a rare treasure. But what if peace wasn't something you had to chase? What if it was something you could build from the inside out? Welcome to the Inner Path, a journey not just toward clarity, but toward truth. In this space, we slow down, we breathe, we listen, we return. Together, we'll explore what it means to live with discipline without rigidity, to find stillness without escape, and to see clearly even when life gets blurry. This is not about perfection. It's about presence. It's about building a life that doesn't just look peaceful, but feels peaceful. From the inside, let's begin. Something feels wrong, and you can't quite name it. Life is full, but somehow still empty. You're surrounded by information, people, noise, and endless stimulation. Yet there's a hollow echo in your chest that no amount of scrolling, buying, or achieving can fill. You check your phone first thing in the morning and again right before bed. You say you're fine, but you're constantly overwhelmed. There's a low hum of anxiety running underneath everything, a restlessness you can't shake, even in your quietest moments. The truth is, many people today are silently suffering from the same invisible disconnection, a disconnection from themselves, from meaning, and from a sense of direction that isn't externally imposed. We've been taught to chase success, comfort, validation, and productivity, but rarely taught how to build the kind of inner life that can actually support all of it. We've learned how to make money, but not how to sit with uncertainty. We've become fluent in multitasking, but lost in single moments. We've been conditioned to stay busy, stay ahead, stay visible, but not necessarily to stay whole. At the root of all this, there is something quietly missing: an inner foundation. An inner foundation is not a checklist, a goal, or a lifestyle. It's the invisible architecture of your character. It's what holds you up when life shakes. It's the core of who you are when the roles, labels, and expectations fall away. Without it, you might still function, succeed, even impress, but your peace will always be fragile, easily shattered by circumstances you can't control. With it, life doesn't get easier, but it becomes steadier, calmer, deeper, more aligned. You stop constantly reacting to everything and start choosing how to respond. You stop looking for the next escape and start building a life you don't need to run from. And in a chaotic world, that's a quiet kind of power. This inner foundation is made of three essential elements: personal discipline, mental clarity, and deep understanding. They aren't glamorous. They won't trend on social media, but they are the keys to a life that actually feels real, grounded, meaningful, awake. Discipline gives you structure when everything feels uncertain. Clarity helps you see through the noise and know what matters. And understanding lets you navigate both your inner world and the outer world without getting lost in either. These aren't things you acquire once and for all. They're things you build, moment by moment, through conscious living. And they don't require you to retreat from life. In fact, they make you more equipped to live fully in it. Without this foundation, you might still go through the motions of life, but something essential will always feel missing. You'll feel unmoored, easily pulled in every direction by the loudest voice, the latest crisis, or the deepest fear. You'll mistake movement for meaning. You'll try to fix internal discomfort with external solutions. And slowly, you'll forget who you are, beneath all the roles you play. But when you begin to rebuild from the inside, when you commit to cultivating discipline, clarity, and insight, you don't just change how you feel. You change how you live. You begin to stand on solid ground. And from there, everything else becomes possible. This is where the journey begins. Not with another promise of quick success, not with another hack for happiness, but with a return to what's always been there, waiting in the quiet. The part of you that is already strong, already wise, already whole. All it needs is your attention. All it needs is your willingness to begin again, not from exhaustion, but from intention. You don't have to do everything at once. You just have to stop abandoning yourself. And the first step is simple. Pause, breathe, and tell the truth. Something feels off. And now, you're ready to find out why, and to build something better from the inside out. Discipline is often misunderstood. It's not about punishing yourself or forcing rigid control. True discipline is care. It is the decision to protect what matters most to you, even from yourself. In a world that glorifies convenience, instant gratification, and emotional reactivity, living with discipline is one of the most radical things you can do. It is choosing long-term clarity over short-term comfort. It is saying no, not because you are hard on yourself, but because you are kind enough to yourself to choose what leads to peace over what leads to chaos. Most people today feel like their lives are out of control, not because they are weak, but because they haven't built inner structure. Without a framework, everything leaks. Time leaks through distractions. Energy leaks through drama. Focus leaks through addiction. And then we wonder why we feel tired, lost, or unfulfilled. The truth is, discipline is what gives you back your life. It's not about adding more tasks to your day. It's about subtracting what no longer serves. It begins with small, intentional choices. Waking up at a consistent time. Eating when hungry, not when bored. Speaking honestly, even when it's uncomfortable. Noticing the moment you want to numb out and choosing to stay awake instead. Personal discipline creates integrity. And integrity is peace. When your actions match your values, you no longer feel divided inside. You stop living two lives, the one people see and the one you hide. You become trustworthy to yourself. And this trust becomes your foundation. It becomes a quiet confidence, a steady rhythm beneath the noise. Living with discipline also means honoring your word, not just to others, but to yourself. If you say you will rest, rest. If you say you'll stop scrolling and meditate, stop. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you send the message. I matter. My mind, my time, my energy, they're worth protecting. Every time you break that promise, you reinforce the opposite. That's why discipline is deeply emotional. It's not just about doing what's right. It's about rebuilding your relationship with yourself. It's about ending the cycle of self-betrayal. It's about being the adult your inner child can trust. In a deeper sense, discipline is the ultimate form of self-respect. It's not something you impose. It's something you cultivate gently, consistently, with compassion. If you fall, you return. If you forget, you begin again. You never shame yourself into growth. You love yourself into it, with boundaries, honesty, and care. And slowly, what felt impossible becomes natural. The cravings fade, the clarity grows. You stop needing the world to validate you, because you've become someone you respect. The more you live in alignment, the less inner conflict you carry. And when your life is no longer full of conflict, you can begin to offer peace to others, not as a performance, but as a natural extension of your being. A person with discipline becomes a presence others can lean into. You become calm in a room full of chaos. You become consistent in a world of contradiction. You become soft, but not weak, firm, but not harsh, quiet, but unmistakably strong. This is not about perfection. It's about direction. It's not about having it all figured out. It's about deciding which road you're walking and continuing even when it's hard. Over time, discipline becomes freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, whenever you want, but the deeper freedom of not being a slave to your impulses. You're no longer tossed around by every emotion or temptation. You're rooted. You're centered. You're free because you know who you are, and you act accordingly. And from this place, you begin to build a life. Not a life that looks perfect on the outside, but a life that feels solid on the inside. a life you can trust, a life you no longer want to escape from. That's the real power of discipline. And it starts now with one small promise kept, one choice aligned, one breath of presence at a time. Most people are not really living their lives. They are reacting to them. They wake up, check their phones, rush into the day, answer messages, attend meetings, put out fires, scroll endlessly, chase something they can't name, and collapse into bed wondering why they still feel hollow. What's missing isn't more stimulation. It's space. Space in the mind, space in the heart. Space between thoughts, between actions, between one breath and the next. Without space, you can't see clearly. You can't feel fully. You can't even tell if you're living your life or someone else's. And yet, space is not something the world gives you. It's something you must reclaim. Stillness is how you do that. Stillness is not just the absence of noise. It's the presence of awareness. It's not sitting in a quiet room. It's becoming quiet inside, even when the world isn't. And that begins with attention. When you start to pay attention to your mind, you see how loud it really is. Planning, worrying, remembering, fantasizing. Your thoughts are like guests that never leave, and you never question whether you invited them. But the moment you pause, even for a breath, you start to see the gap. You start to realize that between each thought, there's space. And in that space, there's peace. Stillness isn't about controlling your thoughts. It's about not being controlled by them. It's the ability to sit in the storm of your mind without getting swept away. It's the strength to choose presence over panic. And over time, this practice changes everything. With stillness, you begin to respond instead of react. You stop needing constant stimulation. You become less anxious, not because your life is easy, but because your mind is steady. You become less overwhelmed, not because the demands disappear, but because your inner space expands. Stillness teaches you that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that notices them. You are the silence beneath the noise. And in that silence, you come home to yourself. You stop running. You stop chasing. You remember that who you are is not found in the future, but in the now. Creating space in your mind doesn't require hours of meditation or escape from responsibilities. It requires moments, a pause before speaking, a breath before reacting, a choice to listen instead of interrupt, a walk without a podcast, a meal without your phone. These small acts of stillness add up. They teach your nervous system that it's safe to relax. They teach your mind that it doesn't need to solve everything right now. They teach your heart that it's okay to feel. And as space grows inside you, your life begins to breathe again. You start to notice the beauty you used to rush past, the sound of the wind, the softness in someone's eyes, the kindness in your own tone. Stillness doesn't remove life's problems, but it changes your relationship to them. It gives you the inner room to choose your response, to carry your pain with grace, to enjoy your joy without clinging, to be here, really here, not as a visitor, but as someone who belongs. Because the truth is, you don't need to run away to find peace. You just need to stop running from yourself. And in the quiet, you will see you are never lost. You are just too busy to notice where you already are. This is the power of stillness. It brings you back, not to a different life, but to the one you already have, seen with new eyes and felt with a new heart. Most of the suffering in this world comes not from what is said or done, but from what is not heard. We live in a time where people talk more than ever, but listen less than ever. Conversations become competitions. Silence becomes uncomfortable. Attention spans shrink. And in the rush to be right, we forget how to be present. But listening, deep, intentional, open listening, is not a passive act. It is an act of courage. It requires stillness, humility, and the willingness to let go of control. It means putting your opinions on pause, not because they are wrong, but because understanding matters more than being understood. It means staying with discomfort when someone shares something that triggers you, not to react or defend, but to stay curious. Deep listening isn't just about hearing words. It's about hearing meaning, emotion, pain, longing, fear, and the humanity beneath the surface. And this kind of listening changes everything. When someone feels truly heard, something inside them softens, defenses lower, trust grows, healing begins. You don't need to fix them. You just need to be fully there. You don't need perfect words. You just need to stay. Deep listening is also how you begin to understand yourself. Most people don't really know what they feel. They only know how they react. But when you sit with yourself without judgment, when you allow your feelings to rise and fall without trying to fix or analyze, you begin to hear what's actually going on inside. You start to notice patterns, wounds, unmet needs. And instead of avoiding or numbing them, you meet them with attention, with care. This is how inner clarity is born. It doesn't come from thinking harder. It comes from listening deeper. Deep listening is also revolutionary in conflict. When you truly listen to someone who disagrees with you, you may not change your stance, but you change your stance toward them. You stop seeing them as an enemy and begin to see them as a human being doing the best they can with the pain they carry. Listening dissolves the illusion of separation. It reminds us that behind every behavior is a story. Behind every opinion is an experience. Behind every outburst is a wound. And when you can hear that, even faintly, you become less reactive and more compassionate. This doesn't mean you accept abuse or stay silent in the face of harm. It means you learn to respond from clarity, not from reflex. You set boundaries with calm. You speak truth without violence. You become someone who brings presence to places that have forgotten how to breathe. Deep listening is not something you master once. It's something you practice every day with strangers, with loved ones, with your own inner voice. And every time you choose to listen instead of react, you change the energy of that moment. You create space for something new to emerge. A deeper understanding, a softer connection, a wiser choice. In a world that wants quick answers, listening is a radical act. It slows down the rush. It honors the complexity of things. It teaches you to meet life, not with assumptions, but with attention. And in doing so, you become someone others can feel safe with. Someone who sees without judging. Someone who hears without interrupting. Someone who is present, not just in body, but in heart. This is not a small gift. It is a rare and powerful offering. And it begins simply by deciding again and again to hear before you speak, to understand before you explain, to witness before you react. That is deep listening. And that is how you begin to truly connect with others, with yourself, and with the life unfolding in every single moment. So many people feel overwhelmed, not because life is too much, but because their minds are too full. When every moment is filled with noise, urgency, and emotional charge, clarity becomes rare. We mistake speed for wisdom. We confuse reaction with response. And we make decisions not from alignment, but from pressure, fear, and habit. Clear thinking is not a gift. It is a discipline. It is something you cultivate by creating space between stimulus and response, by learning to sit with discomfort without trying to escape it. To think clearly is to allow the fog of emotion to settle before you act. It is to ask, is this really true? Is this really necessary? Is this coming from my deeper values or from my old conditioning? Most decisions in modern life are made from two places, anxiety or ego. Anxiety says, I have to do something right now or everything will fall apart. Ego says, I need to prove something, win something, protect something. But neither of those states lead to peace. And peace is not what comes after a decision. It is what must guide the decision. To think clearly is to remember that urgency is not clarity. Just because something feels intense doesn't mean it's true. Just because a choice feels immediate doesn't mean it's wise. The ability to pause, to take one breath before you answer the email, respond to the comment, accept the offer, send the message, is everything. In that breath, you reconnect with your center. In that breath, you ask, what matters most? What will I regret? What aligns with the life I want to live, not just the moment I want to survive? Clarity also means knowing what you're solving for. Too often, people make choices based on what they want to avoid: conflict, discomfort, rejection, failure. But making decisions from avoidance leads to a life of compromise. A clear mind doesn't ask, what will keep me safe? It asks, what is true for me, even if it's uncomfortable? That kind of thinking requires courage. It requires being okay with not being liked, not being fast, not being perfect. But in return, it gives you a life that feels real. A life where you can look at your choices and say, I chose this, not because I was pushed, not because I panicked, but because it felt right in my bones. Clear thinking also requires quiet. If your mind is constantly bombarded by other people's opinions, news cycles, notifications, and to-do lists, it cannot settle enough to hear its own wisdom. That's why unplugging is not indulgent. It's necessary. Sometimes clarity comes not when you think harder, but when you stop thinking altogether and just walk, breathe, rest. You allow the deeper parts of you to rise. You trust that wisdom lives inside silence, not speed. You stop outsourcing your decisions to the world and start trusting the quiet voice within. That voice doesn't shout. It doesn't rush. It doesn't panic. It speaks softly, steadily, and only when you're ready to listen. Thinking clearly also means recognizing the stories you tell yourself. Every mind has narratives about what you deserve, what you should do, what's possible, what you're capable of. Some of those stories were inherited. Some were learned through pain, but none are fixed. You can question them. You can rewrite them. You can step outside of them and choose a new way. That is the ultimate freedom, the ability to choose your response, your direction, your meaning. Clear thinking is not about removing emotion. It's about not letting emotion take the wheel. You feel it, honor it, but you let something deeper steer. And when you do, you begin to notice a shift. Life feels less chaotic. You stop second-guessing every move. You become someone others trust, not because you're always right, but because you're consistently aligned. You move with calm. You act with care. You think with clarity. And in a world that pulls people in every direction, that kind of steadiness is rare. It is powerful. It is healing. And it begins with a pause, a breath, and a choice to live by what is true, not what is loud. Pain has a way of sticking to us, not just in our memories, but in our habits, our reactions, our identities. We carry old wounds like they are part of who we are, and we repeat familiar patterns not because they serve us, but because they are known. Somewhere along the way, pain became normal. We expect to be disappointed. We expect to be judged. We expect love to hurt, trust to break, peace to be temporary. And so we live guarded. We live small. We live repeating the same emotional cycles, even when they make us suffer. But just because something is familiar doesn't mean it is true. And just because something has repeated doesn't mean it is permanent. Letting go of what hurts is not about forgetting. It is about finally seeing clearly. It is about recognizing the story we've been trapped in and deciding to step outside of it. It starts with awareness. You begin to notice, why do I shut down when I'm criticized? Why do I run when I feel vulnerable? Why do I feel drawn to people who can't love me fully? These are not random behaviors. They are survival strategies learned long ago, when you needed protection, when love was inconsistent, when being small felt safer. But now, those patterns keep you stuck. They keep you from growing into the person you long to become. And they don't dissolve just by wanting them to. They dissolve through compassionate awareness. You begin by observing, not judging. You pause when the reaction arises. You notice the urge to run, to lash out, to numb, and instead of acting on it, you stay with it. You ask, what is this really about? What am I trying to protect? What am I afraid will happen if I do something different? In that moment, you create a gap. And in that gap, healing begins. Letting go also means grieving. Grieving the childhood you didn't have, the love you lost, the version of yourself you abandoned to fit in. This grief is sacred. It is not weakness. It is how you make peace with what was, so you can stop dragging it into what is. And slowly, you begin to rewrite your relationship with pain. You stop fearing it. You start learning from it. Pain becomes a teacher, not a jailer. It shows you where you're still holding on. It shows you what you're ready to release. But it will not release you until you are willing to feel it fully. Letting go also requires forgiveness, not always of others, but of yourself. For the choices you made when you didn't know better, for the ways you tried to cope, for the time you spent chasing something that never truly fed you. Forgiveness doesn't excuse the harm. It just means you're done carrying it. You no longer want your past to decide your future. You no longer want your pain to parent your decisions. You choose to break the cycle. You choose to become someone new, not by force, but by clarity. And as you let go, you notice something else. Your body softens. Your breath deepens. Your relationships shift. The world doesn't change overnight, but your experience of it does. You respond with more grace. You take things less personally. You create new patterns, ones built on trust, honesty, self-respect. You begin to live from choice, not from habit. This is not a one-time event. Letting go is a process. It requires patience, gentleness, repetition. You fall back into old ways, and you return again and again, not with shame, but with kindness. You become someone who keeps coming back to center, and that consistency becomes strength. Letting go is not about becoming someone else. It is about returning to who you were before the world taught you to be afraid. It is about shedding what was never yours to carry. And when you do, you make space, not just for peace, but for joy, for connection, for freedom. You realize that healing isn't about fixing yourself. It's about finally being with yourself, with all your history, all your complexity, all your heart, and saying, I am willing to live differently now. That willingness is everything. That is the beginning of real transformation. And it starts simply with the courage to stop holding on. The world is loud, fast, and full of pressure. Every day, you're pulled in a dozen directions by deadlines, notifications, expectations, fears, and distractions. It's easy to feel like you're constantly reacting, constantly trying to catch up, constantly being thrown off course. But the truth is, you don't need the world to slow down in order to find peace. You need to build your own anchor. Being grounded doesn't mean being unaffected. It means being centered enough to return to yourself again and again, even when things get hard. It's the ability to stay connected to what matters, even when everything around you is shifting. Grounding is not a luxury. It's a necessity. Without it, your nervous system stays in survival mode. Your decisions become reactive. Your relationships suffer. Your energy drains. But with grounding, you move differently. You respond instead of react. You pause before you speak. You breathe before you break. And that pause is where your power lives. Grounding begins with awareness. You notice when you're off center, when your breath is shallow, your chest is tight, your thoughts are racing. You catch the moment your mind spirals or your emotions take over. And instead of running with it, you stop, you return. Maybe through breath, maybe through movement, maybe through silence. You find what helps you feel safe, steady, and present, and you practice it daily, especially when you don't feel like it. Because grounding is not just for calm days, it's for the storm. It's the practice of remembering who you are when the world forgets. And it's built in the small moments. Choosing stillness over scrolling, taking a walk instead of replying in anger, drinking water when your body is tense, saying no when your energy says enough. These acts are not minor. They are how you reclaim your center. Staying grounded also means protecting your attention. In a world designed to hijack your focus, guarding your mental space is radical. You don't have to consume every headline, reply to every message, say yes to every request. You are allowed to unplug. You are allowed to step back. You are allowed to be unavailable to chaos. Grounding also means creating rituals. Not rigid routines, but meaningful moments that anchor you. Lighting a candle in the morning, sitting in stillness before work, writing one honest sentence at night. These rituals remind your system, I am safe. I am here. I am whole. And the more you practice them, the stronger your roots become. Over time, the same stressors that once overwhelmed you begin to feel different. You still notice them, but they don't own you. You still feel them, but they don't define you. You become less like a leaf in the wind and more like a tree in the storm, flexible but rooted. Grounding also includes boundaries. When you say no to what depletes you, you say yes to your peace. When you stop explaining your worth, you reclaim your dignity. When you stop overextending, you begin to feel your own center again. You are not responsible for holding up the world, but you are responsible for not letting it crush your spirit. Staying grounded means choosing presence over panic, values over validation, peace over performance. It means knowing that your worth is not tied to how much you produce or how well you keep up. You don't have to earn your right to rest. You don't have to justify your need for space. You are allowed to slow down in a fast world. And in doing so, you become a quiet revolution. A reminder that there is another way to live. A steadiness that others can feel. A mirror for what it looks like to stay human in a world that forgets. This is the power of being grounded. Not perfect, not immune, but rooted, awake, and able to return again and again to the peace that no one can take from you. There comes a point in every journey when you have to decide who you are living for. Are you shaping your life around who you truly are or who others expect you to be? Are your choices guided by inner truth or external applause? Most people spend years performing. They adapt, conform, smile when they don't mean it, say yes when they want to scream no, shrink themselves to avoid rejection, and stretch themselves to earn praise. And slowly, they forget who they are. Living honestly doesn't mean saying whatever you want, whenever you feel it. It means living in alignment. It means your actions match your values. Your words reflect your truth. Your relationships honor your soul. And your choices are not dictated by fear or people-pleasing, but by integrity. Integrity is not perfection. It is wholeness. It is the quiet strength of knowing that you are not pretending, not performing, not betraying yourself to belong. You may lose approval. You may lose popularity. But you gain something far more valuable. Peace. The kind of peace that comes from looking in the mirror and knowing you are not hiding anymore. Living honestly requires courage. Because when you stop performing, people will notice. Some will be uncomfortable. Some will challenge you. Some will walk away. Not because you're wrong, but because your truth exposes what they are not ready to face. That's not your burden. Your responsibility is not to make others comfortable. It is to live in truth, with kindness, with firmness, with love. Honesty is not cruelty. Integrity is not arrogance. You can be real without being rude. You can be direct without being harsh. In fact, the most honest people are often the most compassionate because they know how painful it is to live a lie. They've been there. They've worn the mask. And now they choose freedom. Living honestly also means being honest with yourself, not just about what you want, but about what you're avoiding, the patterns you justify, the relationships you tolerate, the stories you repeat, the excuses you defend. Radical honesty means facing your own shadows, not to judge, but to liberate. It means asking, where am I out of alignment? Where am I not telling the truth? What do I keep pretending not to know? These questions are not easy, but they open the door to healing. Because what you hide owns you, but what you face, you can change. Honesty also creates intimacy. When you stop editing yourself to be loved, you give others permission to do the same. You stop relating through performance and start connecting through presence. The relationships that survive your truth are the ones worth keeping. The ones that fall away were never grounded in who you really are, and that's okay. Not everyone is meant to walk with you. Living honestly means trusting that those who stay for the real you, not the mask, not the role, but the raw, radiant, whole version of you. And that is a love you don't have to perform for. That is belonging you don't have to beg for. That is the kind of life that holds you, not because you fit in, but because you finally stood up and said, "This is me." No more shrinking, no more lying, no more bending into shapes that hurt. From this point forward, I choose truth. Not because it's easy, not because it guarantees approval, but because it is the only way to be free. True strength doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention or force its way forward. It doesn't rely on volume, titles, or intimidation. True strength is quiet. It's steady. It's the power of someone who doesn't need to prove anything because they already know who they are. In a world that mistakes aggression for authority and speed for certainty, quiet strength is easily overlooked. But it is the most resilient, most healing, and most transformative kind of power there is. It's the strength of restraint when others expect rage. It's the courage to pause when others expect reaction. It's the wisdom to act without the need to be seen, applauded, or obeyed. Responding without anger doesn't mean being passive. It means choosing to respond from awareness, not from the fire of wounded pride. Anger is often a mask. It covers pain, fear, shame, and hurt. When we lash out, we feel powerful for a moment, but that power comes from disconnection. And disconnection always costs more than it gives. Quiet strength comes from presence, from knowing that your value doesn't increase when you win, and it doesn't disappear when you lose. It means you can hear criticism without collapsing. You can face disrespect without becoming disrespectful. You can witness chaos and still choose peace, not because you are weak, but because you are deeply rooted. To act without ego is to act without needing to be superior. It means your choices come from clarity, not comparison. It means you don't need to dominate to feel secure. You don't need to control others to feel in control of yourself. You lead with stillness, not with noise. And people feel it. They feel safer in your presence because your energy is not trying to overpower theirs. They feel seen because you are not busy trying to be seen yourself. They feel respected because you are not acting from insecurity. Quiet strength is also humble. It doesn't need to be right all the time. It doesn't need to take credit. It's willing to listen, to learn, to say, "I was wrong," without shame. This kind of humility doesn't shrink, it expands. It creates space for growth, for connection, for transformation. It allows others to let down their guard. Because when you stop posturing, others stop defending. Quiet strength heals. It's the parent who holds firm boundaries with soft eyes, the leader who stays calm in crisis, the friend who listens without trying to fix, the stranger who de-escalates instead of escalating, the person who speaks truth with love, not with arrogance. This kind of strength comes from deep self-awareness, from years of choosing patience over pride, from facing your own wounds and choosing not to pass them on, from learning that you don't need to win arguments, you need to win your peace. You don't need to silence others, you need to listen deeply. You don't need to defend your worth, you need to live it. And you do, quietly, consistently, with a grace that becomes unmistakable. This is the strength that endures, the strength that doesn't burn out, the strength that inspires, not through fear, but through presence. When you embody this kind of power, you change the energy of every room you enter. You become the calm in the storm, the pause in the panic, the clarity in the noise. And not because you force it, but because you've cultivated it, breath by breath, choice by choice, moment by moment. This is how real power moves, not with noise, but with truth, not with force, but with integrity, not with domination, but with dignity. Quiet strength is not about being soft or passive. It's about knowing you don't need to raise your voice when your presence already speaks volumes. The deepest transformation doesn't happen when we change the world. It happens when we change how we show up in the world, when we move from reactivity to presence, from noise to clarity, from self-interest to care. You don't need to be a teacher, a healer, or a guide to bring peace. You just need to become the presence that holds peace. A presence that doesn't fix others, it makes them feel safe enough to heal themselves. A presence that doesn't preach, but lives in such alignment that others begin to remember who they are simply by being around you. Becoming that presence is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. It's about walking through your own fire without hardening. It's about sitting with your own sorrow without becoming bitter. It's about learning how to carry your life with gentleness and letting that gentleness ripple outward. People don't remember your advice as much as they remember how they felt in your presence. Did they feel judged or accepted? Rushed or seen? Dismissed or understood? When you live with awareness, with integrity, with stillness, you begin to affect others without effort. Your calm calms them. Your steadiness steadies them. Your peace reminds them of their own. But this can only happen when your presence is rooted, not in performance, but in authenticity. It is felt in your pauses, your tone, your energy. You don't need to speak a lot. You just need to be fully there. And that presence becomes sacred. It becomes rare. It becomes what people didn't know they needed until they found it. To live this way, you must keep returning to yourself. Not once, but daily. You make space to feel your emotions instead of projecting them. You hold space for others without absorbing them. You move slowly enough to notice what matters. You rest often enough to remember who you are. You become a quiet center in the storm, not because life gets easier, but because you stop leaving yourself in the chaos. You begin to live from inner stability. And from that place, you can walk into any room, any conversation, any situation, and bring a kind of light that isn't loud, but unmistakable. This is not about being nice all the time. It's about being real, being compassionate without collapsing, being strong without closing your heart, being wise without needing to be right. It's about becoming the kind of person who doesn't need the world to be peaceful in order to feel peace, because your peace no longer depends on what others say or do. It comes from within. And when you live from that place, you don't just find healing, you become healing. You don't just talk about mindfulness, you embody it. You don't just escape suffering, you become someone who walks with others through theirs. This is the true fruit of inner work, not a better image, but a deeper presence. Not a cleaner resume, but a cleaner heart. Not a louder success, but a quieter truth. And from that truth, a new way of living begins. A life not built on fear, but on intention. Not rushed by time, but rooted in awareness. Not shaped by ego, but guided by wisdom. This is how we live what we've learned. This is how we honor the strength of discipline, the clarity of stillness, and the depth of insight. Not in theory, in how we treat others, in how we breathe, in how we move through the ordinary moments with extraordinary care. In this way, your life becomes your teaching. Your presence becomes your offering, and your every step becomes a silent invitation for others to come home to themselves. You don't have to escape your life to find peace. You just have to live it differently. What you've built inside, clarity, focus, and grounded insight, will not vanish when this video ends. It will walk with you, in your next breath, in your next choice, in the quiet courage to pause, to feel, to choose again. Remember, peace isn't passive, clarity isn't luck, and insight isn't a gift for the few. They are cultivated step by step with every honest moment you offer yourself. So keep walking, keep showing up, keep returning to the path. Not the one out there, but the one within. Because the most powerful transformation always begins quietly, inside you.